Hello, my name is Marin Whiting, and I love words and language. I am an introvert and an external processor.
Arlo!
I love to think deeply about life, but for me, it's not until those thoughts enter a conversation that they truly become real. Spoken words are the air that imbues life into thought. Like the puppet Pinocchio, my unspoken thoughts share his hope for becoming real. This class, Communications 101, catches me at a very introspective moment in my life. My mother passed away earlier this year, and I am going through divorce after 19 years of marriage. This may be oversimplifying, but my marriage felt like a long and extended conversation with various and sundry noises. Meaning accumulated and became more complex as the years layered upon years. Misunderstandings and unmet expectations hardened the heart of our relationship. We communicated in both words that were said and what was left unsaid. Meaning was transmitted as much through content as it was through tone and nonverbal language. In my marriage, we did not get the conversation right. So often as individuals, me included, we want desperately to get the conversation right, but just miss. It just, something goes awry, and most often it's inexplicable. And my partner and I, we missed over and over and over again. Our missed conversations remind me of the 1999 Mars orbiter. One group of scientists used the U.S. system of measurement, and another used the metric system to tabulate the same numbers and the same distances, but coming to very different conclusions. Consequently, the orbiter missed the objective, which was to gently and precisely fall into orbit around the planet, and instead, it evaporated in the Martian atmosphere. You need the same numbers. Although oversimplified, that can sum up my marriage. Two separate conversations, one using miles, the other using meters, to catastrophic results. When it comes to conversation, I want more than space dust and mismarks. Communication is the hope of being seen, heard, and understood. It is the hope of connection and the vehicle by which we arrive at that holy and revered place, shared meaning. It is through conversation that we understand ourselves, what we think, value, and believe. It is through conversation that we hear another viewpoint, broaden our own perspective, and develop new ideas. It is through conversation that we see beyond what is known into the unknown. It is through conversation that our innate social needs are cultivated and nurtured. In communication, there must be give and take, not only talking, but also listening and learning. Communication is not only routine, the stuff of every day, but also our greatest hopes and aspirations. Communication powers our relationships and breathes life into dreams. Communication is living and dynamic. It changes and moves like the ebb and flow of waves and tidal movements. Communication is a process and a flow. As social animals, each of us wants to connect, deeply connect. However, if you are like me, you instead find yourselves locked into a Mars orbiter dynamic, focused and seemingly working together. We're doing the same thing, right? I ask over and over again. The goal is in sight, connection anticipated, and crash. Implosion, missed the mark completely. But rather than orbit and mutual understanding, you get miles, meters, and space dust over and over and over again. It blows my mind. After my mother's death, my sister and I had a miles and meters situation. There was a great debate about who should take our grandmother's china. No one wanted it, but we couldn't bear get rid of it. I don't know if any of you have that type of familial inheritance. I praise china as perfect for holiday meals, picturing our large family enjoying a Thanksgiving dinner with this china. I left the conversation relieved that my sister had agreed to take this china, this special yet unwanted china. In that same conversation, while I touted the benefits of china for large family meals, my sister was grateful that I would take the china and find practical use of it in my own home. Although we appear to be engaged in the interactive model of communication, a two-way process of conversation with both a sender and a receiver, we got lost in translation. The channel with both message and feedback missed the mark. Rothwell wrote, "Words were transmitted, but meaning was not shared." Exactly. Rothwell explains in his book, The Company of Others, that the importance of feedback to the communication process cannot be underestimated. During our extended debate over China, it was as if our individual antennas were tuned to totally different channels. Our conversation appeared to be interactive, with a back and forth and a sender and receiver, but behaved much more like the linear model of conversation. My sister and I each participated in our own one-way conversation with a closed feedback channel. Somehow my channel was obstructed and meaning was interrupted. Despite my linear versus interactive communication mishap with my sister, family life is truly transactional. Rothwell states that transactional perspective recognizes that communication influences all parties involved. We are defined in relation to each other as we both send and receive messages, often simultaneously, not as individuals separate from others. In a family, there are a myriad number of roles and dynamics at play: parent to child, child to parent, sibling to sibling, older to younger, and younger to older. In the transactional model, Rothwell writes, the roles we play in life result from how we are defined in relation to others. I am a twin, and for my whole existence and all of my childhood, we lived in relation to each other. I was born 45 minutes before my twin sister, and these 45 minutes, unequivocally, with no argument involved, made me the oldest by birth and responsibility. Every familial interaction and conversation came back to this role, both creating it and reinforcing it. I was caretaker and my twin sister a princess, although now she absolutely denies and resents it. This dynamic played out with our parents and our siblings. It began early, playing dress up, my sister the princess and I the maid, or my sister Orphan Annie and I her sidekick, the furry Sandy. Every star, as my sister believed and acted upon, needed a sidekick, and I was hers. Quite honestly, I would much rather been the star, Cinderella, or Annie, and who wouldn't? But I knew my part, it was understood implicitly, and I didn't argue. I, step after step, complied. According to the Rothwell, every conversation is a foothold on our next conversation, and we bring our accumulated experiences to each new conversation. Communication is an ongoing process, and each new experience influences future transactions. Although relationships and roles can feel fixed and frozen in time, forever, the maid and Sandy. Communication is dynamic and fluid. Just as the moon influences the ocean and its tides, we influence relationships, their individual communication roles, and interpersonal dynamics. Roles and relationships are in perpetual motion, in one direction or another. Just because they're in motion doesn't necessarily mean they change in the direction we want them to change. Think about life and all the movement, and also think about life sentence of an emotional rigor mortis without power or ability to change. The idea of being frozen as Orphan Annie's furry sidekick for the rest of my life is unappealing. No thank you. What would be the point? We each have influence over our own voice and how we use it, what I will be and what role I will play. We've got to. We each gain information, insight, and experience. We each have choice. The challenge is to exercise that choice in productive ways. We each create our own meaning from words, language, and tone. I remember 19 years ago, it feels like several lifetimes, where as a 23-year-old, inexperienced with life and relationships, navigating my new marriage relationship. After I got married, I had all sorts of anxiety and expectations that I did not anticipate. I'd never done that before. You don't know what you don't know. My parents had a failed marriage, and my deepest fear at that point in my life was that I would repeat their same mistakes. In the first weeks and months of my young marriage, those fears came flooding into my mind and heart with a power and potency that I had not ever before experienced. It would often keep me up at night. Suddenly, I was capable of walking down my parents' same path. I could actually be my mom for the first time in my life. I remember many teary conversations. I was overwhelmed by my internal dialogue of inadequacy. I wasn't enough. for love. I was bombarded with messages that my marriage would be just like my parents' marriage. I had hoped that my deepest fears and vulnerabilities would be met with loving conversation, deeper connection, and mutual understanding. I was wrong. I had assumptions and bias about marriage that didn't serve me or the relationship. Instead, my heartache and fears were met with anger and hostility. I was judged. Within the dynamic of our interactive communication model, the channel where information was transmitted from sender to receiver and back again was bombarded with noise. Lots and lots of noise. Beyond physical noise, Rothwell explains conversational static is also manifest as physiological noise, our biology, psychological noise, our biases, experiences, and our overall emotional landscape, and semantic noise, our word choice. While I explained to my new partner that I was scared of being married, and after getting married I felt overwhelmed, that I was marching down my parents' footsteps and repeating their mistakes, he heard that he wasn't good enough and that I didn't love him. His bias from his own familial home was that feelings were not something you shared, and problems were definitely for keeping to yourself. Over and over, my shared feelings couldn't be heard. They went on beyond deaf ears, ears that were programmed and biased against my words. Meaning that was transmitted was far different than the meaning that I had intended. But it's not just one person. Noise moved in both directions. On my side, noise also reverberated through communication channel. Love is hard. I thought spouses were supposed to be supportive, right? Relationships are disappointing. I disappoint in relationships. How could I begin to see what was going on with my partner when my own assumptions and experience were operating at top volume? The noise within our marriage compounded over time. It accumulated and accumulated and accumulated. Then finally, it evaporated in a Martian atmosphere. Miles and meters, here we are again. Meaning, growth, change, connection between individuals and within groups has got to be possible. I've got to believe it's possible. I hope it's possible. I want it to be possible. However, the obstacles that get in our way are tricky. They are unseen, yet always present. However, the obstacles that often our personal psychological noise is so much a part of how we move, think, and communicate that its interference cannot be distinguished from our reception and meaning. Our response to others becomes the sum total of our hurts, beliefs, assumptions, and biases, and these are woven into everything we think and say. It feels absolute. It feels like beyond what we know the truth to be. Psychological noise is an invisible culprit, blocking communication channels and preventing shared meaning and connection. It keeps us in our own lens and outside of others. If only we could turn down the volume, flip a switch, or turn a dial and quiet the noise in our heads. Herein lies the challenge. How do we turn down the volume of something we cannot perceive? We all want improved communication and connection. I know I do, but the obstacles are ever present and yet seemingly undetectable. For us to change, make connection, and create shared meaning, individuals must bring this invisible culprit to the light of day. Psychological noise is embedded into our thoughts and woven into our communication. It interrupts transmission and blocks reception. Paying attention can call the unseen into view. Consciously and mindfully, opening the channel of communication between sender and receiver is essential. Declutter communication channels from the array of personal obstacles, like pay attention to the noise. Simple, right? Just turn down the volume of personal agenda, assumptions, biases, fears, and hear. Okay, well, if it's so simple, let's just get started, right? I'm starting right now. And I think the reason we're all here, the reason I'm here again and again is it's difficult. But we are human, and that has both the greatest potential and I think also the possibility for hurt and pain. But in that, the breadth and depth of our potential, we have inherent social needs and wants. We are built to make and find meaning and have biological need for connection. Communication is the bridge each of us must cross to create meaning and feel connection. It is hard to escape communicating. Even not communicating communicates something. One way or another, all day long we interact and communicate. Why not simply try to make it better? Clear out the noise, declutter the channel, and connect. Turn down our volume of our own agendas, our biases, our fears, and let's hear. Let's hear together. Thanks so much.